now welcoming hosts for today's dialogue, please.
I'll be very brief, actually, in respect of the National Art Gallery, Contemporary Art Gallery. We conceived this idea a few years ago, and fundamentally the purpose is to set up a contemporary national art gallery in the old, what used to be called the Super Grammar School, which is now the St. Stephen's, which is the St. Stephen's building. Just by way of background, in those days, of course, education was very much also racialized. So it was only people who were of what we call European heritage that could attend Super Grammar School. And that was the school now, of course, the building opposite Traps. So whenever I mention St. Stephen's building, not many people know about it. As soon as I mention Traps, everybody knows the building. So obviously Traps is a major landmark too, for a contemporary landmark. And of course, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in order for one to set up a gallery, a national gallery of contemporary art. The building itself needs a lot of work around it to ensure that it meets various requirements, various standards of a national gallery. It also then, we need to have the soft infrastructure around it. We also need to have the fundamentals of the management of the gallery itself, the equipment, and of course the thought process behind what the gallery should encompass. What is the rationale behind who do we want to come to the National Gallery, and who do we want to actually actively participate? One of the issues has been in Fiji that we have not necessarily always provided a space for our young people to come and express themselves. Any modern nation state, a country that is a state that is mature, lets loose, so to speak, its music, its arts, its literature, because it is a form of expression. It is a form of commentary on your way of life. It's a commentary on what you are experiencing at that point in time, and perhaps it's a commentary on what you envisage will be, will be coming around in the future. So we have, of course, then partnered up with the British Council, predominantly through the assistance of the British High Commissioner. And the British Council, of course, is helping us at the moment in respect of putting around some of the structures as to, for example, the assessment of the building itself. Yesterday we had a presentation by one of the architects who worked with one of the consultants as to what shape or form the building should take, what are the spaces. We have things like, of course, perhaps concrete decay because the building is very old. We need to be mindful of things like humidity. If you're going to display art, what levels of humidity are in the room. Do we allow for spaces? In fact, we should allow for spaces for people to perhaps have some performances, in terms of music and dance, etc. And of course, one of the things that we are very keen on is the ability to allow young people to come and, for example, get lessons in artwork. As I mentioned earlier on, we have seen many fantastic art pieces. When we, for example, have now the Kula Awards, we've seen various other art competitions in high schools. And a lot of these people are very good artists, young people, but they sort of fall by the wayside because there's no actual support basis for them once they leave the high school environment. And some of them perhaps once they leave the university environment, and they do not have a regular form of income, they do not necessarily have the ability to get mentorship by people who can teach them the next stage of art. So which is of course a lost talent, it's lost productivity, it's a lost form of expressing yourself. And that is what this environment should also do, is to provide that environment to harness this talent, harness this raw talent at times. So that essentially, in a nutshell, is what this Gallery of Contemporary Arts will be doing, and what we envisage it will be doing, and what we'll be providing for, what type of environment it will have. We are hoping that the gallery should be ready, as discussed yesterday, at the latest by middle of 2020. And of course, in the meantime, quite a lot of work needs to be done. Today's gathering, of course, is to do with plastics. And what do we do with plastic, and in fact turning plastic into a form of art? As you know, plastic has become the bane of our society, really. We have recently, of course, announced the 10 cents levy on the usage of plastics, and of course now a 20-cent levy as of yesterday, or day before yesterday, from the 1st of August. But it's a much bigger problem than just simply plastic bags. There are other forms of plastics that are being used. Recently I was just reading an article where they pulled out a whale from the ocean, and the whale had about 4 kilograms of plastic inside in the belly of the whale. Of course, there's numerous other stories you can tell. And Fiji, of course, is not immune from the ravages of plastic waste. So this is, of course, one of the initiatives the British Council has been working on, bringing people together, and how we can actually use this particular pollutant, if you like, and an eyesore, and turn it into a form of an art. What can we do with it? It can be a form of simply using the material to turn into art. It can also be a form of being rebellious against the fact that we're using plastic. And many other countries will, of course, continue to use plastic post-2020. And the idea, of course, of bringing everybody together today is to bring the artists together, various other stakeholders, what we can do in terms of reusing of plastics. I also am quite glad to see other development partners in this room who, of course, can provide their input into it. I'm also hoping that some of them will come on board in respect of perhaps providing some funding later on. When we have the various projects laid out, we've got professionals putting it together, and we hope that it becomes a space where we not only have the display of contemporary art from Fiji, but also provide the opportunity for art from other parts of the world to travel to Fiji. We've seen previously, for example, the U.S. Embassy has had artists display their art, but it's been held at the embassy itself. You can now have a public place, a contemporary art gallery where all of these displays can be held. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's in a nutshell what we are here about today. Of course, there are a lot of people who have the expertise on plastic. We'll be talking about that too. I'm glad to see the two honourable ministers here, because they, in fact, ministries are directly affected by plastic and various pollutants. Of course, we have a new Ministry of Waterways, which has now been merged with the Ministry of Environment, which makes a lot of sense, develops that synergy that's required, and I'm sure the honourable ministers will have a lot to say in that respect. I'd like to take this opportunity, without saying too much more, to thank High Commissioner Melanie Hopkins for her enthusiasm and for her impetus in respect of tying us up with the British Council. We look forward to working with the British Council, of course, with the continued work, but also with the other stakeholders who can provide a specific assistance to us and work together with us, because at the end of the day, to be able to come up with a very good product, we need the input of many other stakeholders to be able to give a fantastic product, which will be really a showcase for our young people and a great opportunity for them. One of the things that we've done, of course, which is fairly unique, is that in Fiji we've got the Department of Climate Change actually sitting within the Ministry of Economy. One of the regular complaints we get from many of the ministers who are ministers of environment or ministers responsible for climate change from other jurisdictions is they say that the ministries of finance or ministries of economy do not understand the implications of climate change, and we do not necessarily get the right support. There's a frequent complaint, and in fact a couple of years ago when we were at the World Bank annual World Bank meetings, there was a huge move by many of the developed countries to say, maybe that the climate change officers now should sit within the Ministry of Economy, and we said, well, we've already done it. And that's precisely the reason why we did do that, and that is, the idea is to mainstream climate change into our national planning, mainstream climate change into our financial decisions that we do make pertaining to the country and, of course, the development ahead. So it's very critical for us to be able to understand. I'm picking up on the point made by the Permanent Secretary for Education about how certain things need to become part and parcel of our subconscious. Whether it's the Constitution, whether it's civil rights, political rights, socioeconomic rights, and all the other issues pertaining to even plastics. I mean, 50% of the Fijian population is now 27 years or younger. Now, these are people are like sponges. So if you are able to inculcate that awareness, engender that awareness in the way that we speak, in the way they speak, the way the literature we give them, the priorities we say that are our priorities, our national priorities. They will in a few years' time, of course, become the great ambassadors of that way of thinking. And that is what is really, really critical for us to be able to understand. And getting back to the point about climate change being within the Ministry of Economy is precisely for that reason. Because every year, as the ministers would tell you, we have the permanent secretaries, respective permanent secretaries come in meeting up with the national planning people, which sits within the Ministry of Economy, the permanent secretary of economy, and they talk about what they're going to do, what needs to be done. So if you have the climate change influence there, then obviously they start thinking along those lines. So I'll give you a case in point. We have this issue about building ice plants in remote areas, remote islands, as to for people to catch their fish they produce and keep it in the ice plants. Now for decades, when we set up these ice plants, sometimes or most of the time, a lot of these ice plants don't work. It's run by a generator. So somebody needs to take care of the logistics pertaining to taking the diesel to the ice plants. So if you don't get the diesel on time there, the ice plant stops running. So the fish will rot, or the ice plant cannot be used. So, we have people in the ministries that simply think along those lines, and they think about having a backup generator, as opposed to perhaps having a backup solar panel. So most of this, ice plants on the islands, remote places, have actually a very ample supply of solar energy. So these are the types of ways in which we are trying to sort of mainstream this way of thinking. Similarly with plastic, of course, we hear, of course, talking about art, about plastic within the art context. Yes, this is something that's been produced, as the various ministers have highlighted. It's a cheap alternative, and in fact a very convenient form of storing things. Previously, because of plastic now, and past number of decades, we were able to, store things a lot longer. We were able to carry things distances that we thought we could not carry it. And, traditionally, it would have been very, very difficult to do so. So it has had its use. The issue now, of course, as the Minister for Health was saying, there are, of course, alternatives to it. We won't be able to get rid of plastic altogether. I was in fact told, I wanted to, I drink this water called 18 degrees. I'm not doing a plug for them, but they are the only bottled water company that actually stores water in glass bottle. Now, none of the other water bottle companies do. So I said to my staff, I said, look, I want to have this bottle of water because I want to send a message. They said, no, you can't have it because, you see, this is glass. The cap is maybe steel, it's not necessarily plastic, but they said that the inside of the cap is plastic. The small piece here is plastic. Now, if it wasn't for this small piece, you would get contaminants going into the water. You won't be able to store the water, for a longer period. It won't have the level of shelf life. So it is necessary. But if you look at this component of the entire bottle, that plastic cap inside is perhaps not even 10% of this entire bottle. So, we have to be, of course, understand that these are the dynamics at play. You simply cannot get rid of plastic altogether. There's certain drums that are being played there that's made out of plastic. So we're going to tell Rocco to not play that particular music, or play that particular beat. So we have to have an appreciation of where we are at. We need to find, of course, alternatives. There may be situations we may not find alternatives. So how do we actually dispose of it? How can we use it? So we may use it for art form. We may use it, for example, for planting around the house. So this is how we need to look at it. And of course, in Fiji's case, as has been highlighted earlier on, that we need to ensure that the tourists that come to Fiji, majority of them, they come for two fundamental reasons. One is the Fijian people, because there are numerous surveys that have been held a number of years, and we are deemed to be the most friendliest people, and it's a fact. We have, for example, tourists when they bring their children, and then 2 weeks later when they're about to leave, the kids don't want to leave because they become so attached to their nannies. They'd rather stay with the nanny than the parents. Says something a lot about parenting, but there's another aspect of it. Now, the other aspect, of course, is our pristine environment. But the reality is that many tourists do not necessarily come down to the Suva foreshore. If you walk down the Suva foreshore, it's actually quite abysmal at times. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I know the Uto Nialo crowd, they've done various trips up the Navua River and Rewa River where they've collected plastic. And as has been highlighted, I mean, these are sort of, day-to-day issues we need to deal with. So from an art perspective, yes, we need to turn this into art forms. We need to, create a particular level of consciousness about the deleterious effect of plastic and how we should actually manage that. So we hope that through this, initiative, that we'll be able to get a different perspective on art. But I think on art and of course plastic. But I think some of the fundamental issues that have been raised by the honourable ministers and also the peers, I think, are very poignant, and we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
By two dance groups, Rako and
paintings, transport the paintings, but again, so I would urge you, if you have a moment, to just go.
Daily the vector-borne diseases from plastic bottles. And ladies and gentlemen, we
A story and a question, very short story. I celebrated Bastille Day, 300 guests at the residence. I decided to go plastic free. I ended up paying more for bamboo than for champagne. And I can assure you I had a lot of champagne. And the reason is to get rid of the plates, the knives, the forks, the glasses. I had to order from Australia. So what can we do here to promote real alternatives? Because really to get rid of plastic, it takes incentives. You have a levy on bags. It takes rules. In France, we ban certain categories of single-use plastic. It takes commitment from the industry. In France, we target a 100% recycling of plastic by 2025. But most of it takes personal commitment, awareness, and dedication. But of course, it will be much easier if we could have here in Fiji real alternatives to plastic. And as a side positive effect, that would allow me maybe next year to offer even more champagne if I can cut down on the bill for bamboo. Thank you.
First, thank the whole panel for touching upon each of these topics. But so as our Minister of Health first mentioned bottles, first I think not of mosquitoes, but of bottled beverages. And the company is currently externalizing costs which degrade both human and environmental health. So my question then is, how do we both facilitate corporate social and environmental responsibility as baseline practice, avoiding pushback from companies fighting against regulation in the name of their profit margins? And how do we facilitate the growth of small and micro enterprise with focus on getting creative with our agriculture, our land use, as bamboo was just mentioned, and youth employment and entrepreneurship through consciously constructing a circular economy that values waste and its production, collection, separation, management, and remanufacturing. So if we value every waste material, not just raising fees on plastic bags and instituting container deposit legislation on plastic bottles, would people be burning their rubbish or throw it in the waterways if they knew it had a monetary value? So how do we decentralize these benefits across the economy and provide livelihoods in both outer island communities and informal urban settlements alike? So, thank you.
I mean, you obviously, as we said earlier on, you have to take a holistic approach to it. You cannot, for example, say, we hate plastic, let's get rid of plastic. You might actually create a black market for plastic if you don't have alternatives. It's a fact. In the same way that we say, let's have a ban because it's the Sabbath on Sunday, let's not drink alcohol by midnight, but you create a black market for it. Everybody knows that. You have nightclubs that people pay on the side and then they keep it open. In the same way, of course, if there is a demand for plastic or there is no alternative to plastic, there'll be a growth in that. And I think we, in countries like Fiji, there are early days, to be frank, in terms of finding alternatives, in terms of finding cheaper alternatives. I mean, I have seen another alternative to the straw, which is not bamboo. There's a particular grass that grows in Fiji. It's green. I forget the actual name. It's got sort of about 3 or 4 leaves that comes out of it. You see quite a lot of it. Yeah. I mean, my notion of paragrass is a different paragraph. It's like a reed, but it's like a reed. And in fact, I've seen it everywhere when they're using it as straws and by the roadside. So that's a much cheaper alternative, Your Excellency, to bamboo. And in fact, you probably can grow it yourself in your yard. So those things are there, but it's not being sort of, I suppose, advocated. We do need to do that. There needs to be some form of mechanism where the ministries can get together to be able to provide those alternatives. I mean, similarly, we talk about informal settlements, we talk about maritime islands, etc. Of course, it ties in with, we have our microfinance grants of $1,000 when people start up new businesses. Perhaps there needs to be a lot more focus in terms of the businesses that they're going to run. What are the materials they're going to use in sort of running their businesses? So I think there's a number of alternatives from that perspective. But there's no doubt that if we are going to, I mean, we're kind of straying away from the art side of plastic now. But if we are going to talk about alternatives to plastic, we do have to find alternative solutions to it. And sometimes at this point in time, because of the economies of scale, we may not necessarily be able to find cheaper alternatives in Fiji. I mean, the other point about it is that apparently we don't produce enough plastic or enough waste to have recycling plants in Fiji. At one stage, we were talking a few years ago about getting all the plastic from the Pacific, bringing it to Fiji, and then sending it off somewhere else where they can recycle it. Because apparently we in the Pacific don't even produce that much waste to have a super duper recycling plant. So again, we face those problems too. I understand now there's some new technology that's coming about where you can have smaller recycling plants, which we do not know whether they give us the same quality output as far as the alternative product is concerned. So those are the challenges that we do face. I mean, economies of scale is a major issue for the Pacific. I mean, not just from the waste perspective, but other perspective, even in terms of attracting businesses. Many businesses don't necessarily, large-scale companies don't want to come to the Pacific because we don't have enough people. I mean, we have a population base, if we take Papua New Guinea into consideration, of 10 million people. That's the like size of one suburb in New Delhi. So you can see that the level of attraction that you get from a business perspective will be limited. So we have to become creative. We need to have solutions that are not actually individual or sovereign-driven solutions. They need to be regional-driven solutions. And this is why we need to work together with our multilateral partners and the MDBs, etc., to get the regional cooperation. And CAP, last week we were talking in the Talanoa session. That's one of the things we did highlight. That if you, for example, want to get renewable energy, like setting up a solar farm, the size of the countries and most of the Pacific Island countries, or a single country, is not attractive for business to set up a solar farm. They literally need thousands and thousands of acres of land to get a super duper, what do you call a bankable proposition for solar farm. Now, many of the countries we're talking about don't actually have thousands of acres as a total land mass. So that is a challenge we have. So it requires a regional cooperation. In the same way, we talk about stopping the effects of pollutants in the seas, etc. It requires, a regional and global approach to it. But we can make, various, I suppose, starts in our own little way. But I think you've asked a very wide question, and it is actually requires a very holistic approach to it. It is not just something that's restricted to an individual country to